Should be okay now. Should be okay. Okay. You want me to repeat everything I said? So I'll just move on. I apologize. There was no sound, but the sound should be okay now. You can check, inshallah. I forgot to unmute. So, and then next to Sister Adima, we have Dr. Kitam Hamdan. She is a mental health director with An-Nisa, and mashallah, prominent leader, leading the Muslim community in all of the issues related to mental health, domestic violence, depression, anxiety, addiction. And she's also part of our ISGH team where, alhamdulillah, at ISGH, we have dedicated one khutbah of the month. Every month, the fourth khutbah will be dedicated to family matters, inshallah. And we are working with the Nisa team, and Dr. Kitam is leading that initiative, and mashallah, providing the necessary resources that are needed for khatibs to deliver appropriate and relative khutbahs for the Muslim community. So inshallah, without any delay, I'm going to begin, and we'll go right into the meat. We'll go right into the discussion, and I'm going to pass on the mic to Sister Azima Rahman, inshallah, if you can open the floor and open the discussion, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am told to use both mics, so please, I might look ridiculous, but I'm supposed to do this. That's what I was told, right?
Yes.
Can I put this?
Yeah, you can just put it down. There you
Okay, good. You can always correct me if I go astray. I was given the task of asking some questions of our panelists over here. Some of the religious questions we would like to address to Sheikh, both perhaps both Imam Tawheed and Sheikh right here, and then and other questions to our psychiatrist and our psychologist. So I would like to start off with one of the questions that I think is on everybody's mind, and that is how to grieve for what has happened in the past few weeks. How do we grieve, right? How do we move beyond and get to some more productive solutions and hopefully some guidance that we can get from our wonderful panelists here. Cal, would you like to start with that? Go to my right.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Salam.
It's definitely an honor to be here and back in person. We haven't done this in a while since the COVID days. So this question is actually a very loaded question, and one of the things that I did with the Anissa team is we did a grief session for everybody that works there, because there's been a lot going on in the past week. And there's some, grief is actually, there's one layer of what happened, the Moravian tragedy, compounded with what happened with the school in Avondale. There's just been so many things ongoing, so it's gotten to the point where it's complicated grief. And one of, there's the different steps of grief that I'm not going to get into in terms of, where you're in shock, and then you're in denial, and then you get into anger and bargaining, and then ultimately you get into, acceptance. I'm not going to talk about those. What I want to talk about is what all of us need to do, and in terms of what they found, is that the first step is actually acceptance. And that's usually difficult because, there's so many questions around what has happened. But at the end of the day, as Muslims, one of the things is that we have to surrender to the will of Allah, to what has happened, to accept it, in order to move forward to the next step. Because if you do not accept it, you can't get into the next step, which is the number 2, is to actually, what are you feeling? We are very good at questioning and asking, but when you do that, that's all above the neck. But when I ask the question, what are you feeling, it actually requires you to go below the neck and into your body, and to actually really feel your feelings. And as a culture, that's not very normal for all of us. And so when I ask that question, it's more than just, well, I feel sad or I feel shocked, or it's literally, actually, you know what, I'm feeling shocked, numb, but I'm feeling it in my shoulders are tense. The body is actually more intelligent than the physical brain. And so when we actually feel it and sit with that pain, you start healing. And that's very foreign to a lot of people because it feels like we need to be doing something. But But there's nothing more powerful than actually just, number one, just name what you're feeling and actually just allow yourself to feel it in your body and actually locate it. Is it in your shoulder? Is it in your chest? Is it in the bottom of your stomach? You know, I had a woman tell me her hands are tingling. Another woman told me that her neck, her shoulders, she couldn't bring her shoulders down, which is usually a sign of fear. Another one said the pit of her stomach was just growling and just felt like there was such a tight knot. And we sat there for 5-10 minutes while she felt that. And the amount of tears that gushed out was profoundly healing, more than we ever could imagine. And sometimes I wish I could do a body scan while someone is actually feeling what's in their body so they could physically see what is actually happening by sitting below the neck with their feelings. Now the third step, which I don't think we're there yet, but inshallah as a community we are, because that's why we're organizing this, is to actually take what has happened, once we've accepted it and noticed our feelings. Third step is actually to come together and to grow from this, to figure out what do we need to do differently. Because there is hikmah in what has happened, as horrific as it is. One of the key things is for us to learn from this. And that's going to take a collective effort, not only from this group here, but also from the community. And then the final step, which will come months later after doing step 3, is actually to redirect that energy where you're not holding the energy of the grief, but you're actually moving it towards energy of growth collectively. So I know that was kind of a long answer, but just wanted to kind of explain what that was like. Inshallah, it was helpful.
Thank you for that. Dr. Shakir, would you like to elaborate from your perspective?
I think she described very nicely. The only other thing I would like to mention is grief is a normal reaction. We all go through grief. But grief can progress to complicated grief or depression. And when this happens, you need to seek professional help. And the difference between normal grief and the major depression or major depressive disorder is that a person may have suicidal thinking or suicidal behavior. It's okay to think about being with a deceased person, but it's not okay to have suicidal thoughts. We have planned. Also, it's normal to see or hear deceased person's voice, but it's not okay to have hallucinations, voices telling you to hurt yourself, for example. So if you feel like you're feeling hopeless and constant suicidal thoughts, then you need to seek professional help.
We have one.
I would like to go on to the second most thought about question that I believe everybody here thinks about this in some respect, where you think, most people think that domestic violence is reserved to somebody beating their spouse. However, there are some other ways you can degrade someone without beating them. What are some red flags that many of us do not pay attention to that happens within perhaps our own families? Because we as a society, as a community, are taught not to talk about our feelings, first of all, to not discuss what's happening in the family that might affect you negatively. So how do we, as our children, as family and friends, of people who have red flags in their family? This time I'll start over here.
So first of all, we need to keep in mind domestic violence is very common. In psychiatric or psychology literature, we call this intimate partner violence. According to Center of Disease Control, every 4th woman is a victim of domestic violence. So it's very common. Now regarding the question, I think the risk factor or
yes, some red flags.
For the victim or the abuser?
That's a good question.
Okay.
How about you pick one perspective?
Okay. Okay. So it's, as I said, it's very common and it's thrive in silence. So typically victim unable to disclose the abuse right away. The typical profile of an abuser is basically someone who has a traumatic childhood. Commonly we see kids who grow up in a broken house or in a house where they witness domestic violence. They are at high risk of becoming an abuser. Now, regarding mental illness, I know on media it always shows that someone who has mental illness is violent. But what we know is having a mental illness does not put you at high risk of being be a violent person. However, if you have a mental illness and if it is not treated, then you are at high risk of getting involved in violence. On the top of that, individuals who have mental illness, they self-medicate with substances. So when someone who has mental illness and unmedicated and also doing drugs, they are at high risk of becoming a violent individual in a relationship. Beside that, access to weapons or firearms is another risk factor. And having anger management problems is another risk factor to be a violent person. Traumatic relationship, chaotic relationship is also a risk factor. So these are few of the risk factors of the abuser. And Dr. Hamdan, would you like to expand on this?
So this is also, we did a let's talk last night for Anissa on red flags. And the reason being is that generally what we have found, and this is not just in our community, most communities, when you bring up the topic of domestic violence, 90% of the community shuts their ears because they say that's not us, that's the other 10% that's over there. So we actually crossed out that topic and we changed the topic to red flags. And the reason being is the majority of us have red flags in our relationships. And the reason we're mentioning red flags is because not to say, oh, if there's a red flag, the relationship has to end. No, it's that there are red flags. Let's work on these red flags sooner before they get too bigger and things where it has to lead to divorce or something catastrophic. And if you can recognize those early on and get help early on. And one thing that's actually quite hopeful is the younger generation is coming for help much sooner. Statistically, the average, it took 6 years for a marriage to actually come to therapy. Now they're actually seeing the younger generation within 1 to 2 years coming because they don't want to follow in the footsteps of their older generation. So that's a good thing. And those individuals are easier to work with because there's less baggage, less resentment, less complications. So back to the question of red flags. There are a variety of them, and we don't have a whole time, but I'm going to get into, I just say pay attention to conflict and how is conflict happening. If you are not able to have healthy conflict, and it's usually resulting in a lot of verbal abuse. I always think of it as Islam, that the significance of the tongue. And I correctly and directly, and I want the scholars to talk about this, but I really feel like there's some association with the impact of verbal abuse and in Islam why we have to pay attention to our words, because more than physical abuse, the emotional and verbal abuse is actually more impactful. They found statistically that the verbal abuse has far more legs than actually a black eye. And we don't think of that as abuse. We just think of it, well, short-tempered, hot-tempered, oh, she should have talked back or else he wouldn't have said that, And it's not to say it's one person or the other. It usually takes two to tango. Both are contributing to that. One of the things he said was that abuser, he has a history of trauma. Often, though, someone is getting married to somebody who has those statistics, they also have insecurities that they're working on. They're getting into this relationship with mental health issues. So it's not just one direction. Often what I've noticed is there are things that both parties can work on. Now, if there's severe characterological abuse, which is really in only 5 to 10% of the situations, the majority of the time there's things for both parties to work on. So conflict, how do you do conflict resolution? Is somebody very controlling and they're not letting you, have contact with outside family members? Do they try to use spiritual abuse? Do they try to use finances? Do they not let you work? Do they not let you, do they not have any financial decisions in the household? There's very different ways, very different ways, I'm just sending comments and making you feel less than, like in terms of physical presence. So there's various layers. The key is that if you are having conflict in your relationship, bad times and good times, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. And so in the beginning, things are usually more good than bad. And then as you get bad, things get progressed. They usually flip. So Don't wait till it's 100% bad to start getting help. If you're getting into the bad, start getting help. 60% good, 40% bad. Let's get some help. Just talk to a professional. There's a science to being in a relationship. Just want to, and so I think for us, we really want to there's actually a science to being in a relationship. When you're single, you don't know what you're single, but when you get in a relationship, when you get over, it's better at pushing your buttons, they'll do a phenomenal job. And so that is when you need to work on yourself. And there is a science to it. There is there's so like, I'm more than happy to give resources, but make sure they are a relationship specialist. They are certified in one of the three, which is a dominant relationship specialist, Imago, or EFT. They will be those individuals that are going to work with you to save your marriage, not to destroy it.
I have a comment.
Yes.
No, right.
Can I ask some questions as well?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First, I would like to welcome everybody as the host here. Thank you all for coming and jazakumullah khair. Also, I wanted to give some nasiha advice to all of us so we can benefit from this, inshallah. As Muslims, Islam, the relationship between Islam and mental health, psychological health, and the science is the relationship between the whole and the part. So, mental health and all of that is part of Islam. It's not the other way around. So, it is part of the religion. I want us to have that very clear in our head. So, science, mental health, psychological health, therapy, ibadah, worship, aqidah, all of that comes under Islam. So when we understand that, we do not separate. Because I'm seeing like the questions, it's like, when we talk about health and mental health is one thing, and when we're going to talk about religious issues is another thing. No, this is a religious issue. What we are here for today is a religious issue before anything else. So domestic violence is a religious issue. As Dr. Hamdan said, that verbal abuse, because the word, it raises some rejection in us. When we say, domestic violence, we always imagine a man beating up a woman. As Dr. Shakil mentioned, 1 in every 4 women is subject to domestic violence, and 1 in every 9 men also subject to domestic violence. And you are going to go down and you will find sometimes it's 50-50 based on the abuse or the tool of abuse or verbal abuse or the injury, sustaining injury and all of that. You will find men and women, they are in the same playing field, even though women are more. But when you say domestic violence, do not feel that women are on the receiving end and the men are the ones who are impacting all the time. So that's why I'm saying it is a religious issue. Last point I want to mention, we always talk about the red flags and we talk about the problems. But actually, and I'm going to challenge my dear psychologist and psychiatrist here, that there is no actual definition of the good behavior. And we talk about bad behavior, but nobody defined for us what is a good behavior. Who is a balanced, psychologically balanced person? Because based on that, then I will know if I'm balanced or not. Then I will know what is violence, what is this, and what is that. So if you go to a professional who will tell you that drinking, socially drinking is okay, but when you drink and drive is not okay, that is not a good behavior, for us as Muslims. So, this is the discussion. I just want to direct the discussion to have me as a sheikh here, I have a comment on every point as well. It is not like only this point will be for the sheikh and this point will be for the psychologist or the psychiatrist. I hope that we are clear in that. And I'm not saying it in an offensive manner. I'm saying it in a very academic manner. I read a lot. I prepared a lot before this lecture. And inshallah, we'll benefit all from that, inshallah. So please, I really appreciate if I'm given a chance, inshallah, to comment on the religious aspect of every point that we discussed. Jazakumullah khair.
I was coming to you, Sheikh. I did not forget you. I was just being passive the baton here and there,
That's
but
all
I
right.
did not forget you.
That's okay.
I have a very important question for you.
I want to comment on Jazakallah khair because you actually, thank you, because you shifted You're absolutely right. And even in the literature, you will see a lot more literature out there talking about the red flags and not enough talking about the green flags. And psychologically, when you reinforce the red flags, guess what you get?
Red flags?
Yeah. So maybe if we start showing them what the green flags are and telling people are, so I will share 3 green flags. The first one is they actually, when you're in a conflict situation, each party is willing to apologize and take responsibility for what they're doing wrong. That's a green flag, meaning that's healthy. Another green flag is the person is actually able, even if not in that moment, can reflect and come back and actually take ownership for something. That's a green flag. Another green flag is willing to work on it. They might not have any answers, they might not be able to, but just being willing to work on it. Those are green flags. So those are 3 green flags that inshallah we can share more throughout the day.
Thank you.
So Sheikh, a question for you, and this will be religious in nature, because you're the best person to answer that. But oftentimes, and the caveat to that is, you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean that only women are victims of domestic violence. However, most of the statistics, the reason we often talk about our sisters and women is because 85% of them are the victims of violence. But the 15%, they are our brothers and men out there who are also part of it. So this is becoming, or is already an epidemic, and so we have to address it. But coming back to our beautiful religion of Islam, oftentimes Islam is used as a weapon to assert or justify a particular behavior on either side, right? Either you're a victim and you justify that, yes, I deserve this because Islam says that, or I can do this because Islam allows that. One gender or the other, I'll leave that up to you. But how can we continue to address this and educate our community, particularly our Muslim community, so that we stop using that?
Right. Actually, the question has the answer. Whatever you said, you answered the question at the end. How can we educate? So basically, it's education. As Dr. Hamdan said, whenever you emphasize the red flags, always you get red flags. So whenever a person says, Islam says that, that's why I'm doing that. What is your basis? What's your dalil? Where do you get that from? Why you understood it that way? All those are supposed to be questions, right? So if a husband tells his wife, I'm your husband, you have to obey me and you have to stay down there. Okay, so where did you get that from? Whose understanding is that? Like what is the hadith about this? If he said, no, that's my understanding, then we have a problem, right? So it's basically education. That's why I tell people always come to the masjid, always study the fiqh, always ask the people of knowledge. Scholar has to have 2 conditions, to ask them and trust them with your religion. Two conditions, only 2 conditions. Number 1, that they have to have piety and righteousness, means you find a match between what they say and what they do all the time. You find that they are actually really following what they do, that you see that they are a role model, that they are someone that you can look up to. Number 2, they know what they're talking about, means they are qualified in what they're talking about. So if they are talking about family, they know about family, they studied about family. His master's or his PhD or whatever in tafsir, he's talking about tafsir, So those 2 conditions. So whenever a husband or a wife, it is not up to me to interpret or define the religion. That is the pandemic that we have. Everybody hearsay. He found his father doing, that's he's doing. Found his grandfather doing, إِنَّ وَجَدْنَا أَبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ. We found our parents doing that, so what's going to do? Our culture is doing that. Women do not talk back to their husbands. Women have to prepare the food all the time. The men have to do such and such. Where did you get that from? Where is the Quranic ayah? Where is the hadith? None. Okay? So basically, come to the masjid, attend the lectures, trust a scholar, and then that is the basis. That's why in the beginning of marriage, we have to agree on those things. We have to talk about those things. So basically what you said is education is the solution. Education is the solution. That's why we have to have those conversations and those lectures and those courses. At the end, I wanted to mention that this violence part, the least of it is the physical one, even in Islam. In Islam, the least of it is the physical part. Dr. Hamdan said about the word. He said about the word. And the Prophet ﷺ, on more than one occasion, he told the person, including his wife one time, he said, the word that came out of your mouth, if it is mixed with the ocean, it would make it impure. Word only that someone said about someone else. Just one word. Okay? So also in our fiqh, in our jurisprudence, humiliation can be a word that the husband says. Even silence sometimes. Not even saying something is abuse. You know? So it's not only talking. Sometimes not talking is torturing the person, right? So when you need to talk to them but you don't, it is as bad as when you don't need to talk to them and you do. It is always like that. And for your surprise, this can be ground for divorce. A ground for divorce if a husband tell his wife you're ugly, or he insulted her, or he told her a bad word about her parents. It's ground for divorce and she takes her full rights. I know it's scary, but it is there in our religion. So the deen of Islam is the deen of learning. Once we learn things, then this, all this pandemic is going to go away.
Okay, is it your turn now to ask some questions before?
No, you're doing a great job, so keep doing it.
Okay, then I will get that list from you with more questions on it. But for now,
You have some-
this is a question I have.
Okay, we do have, we also want to take some questions from the audience.
Do I do that
If you're-
now?
Okay. Can I, you want to go directly to the questions? Okay. So the sisters have questions, so they want to.
Assalamu alaikum. Subhanallah, it's a great conversation. I have actually two questions, however, and in a religion, alhamdulillah, Islam, where taking life of someone unjustly, including one's own life, is forbidden and a sin, where divorce is halal under circumstances which are justified. Before it comes to killing one's own self or someone else, there are doors that are open, religious, medical, psychological, community, and one should be encouraged and feel safe to seek one of those. The other, and I would love for the comment on that, like how the narratives can be changed in alhamdulillah, in our religion where it is allowed. It's not that once you're married, there is no other up from there. The second is, I think, calling about the green flags and the red flags. One of the most important things is start earlier. When we start seeing in our younger children, in our teenagers, these behaviors that can then lead to a pattern, I think calling wrong should become common again. We should normalize it again. And it's okay. It's also part of love and affection that we don't hurt people that we love. And I would love to get the comments from both our teams on that, how early should we start seeing? Because many times in our own love, as mothers, as fathers, as we ignore things that are starting in teenage years or even earlier, and then they eventually develop habits and then lead to problems.
Anyone in particular you want to go first? Okay. Chief.
No.
Go ahead.
You do.
You go first.
You do, I'll
There
comment.
So very good question. So early intervention makes a difference. So what we know from the research, a positional defined disorder begins at a very early age when child is not listening, not following direction, argumentative, stealing, lying, and this progress to conduct disorder in teenage when ODD or a positional defined disorder is not addressed, when patient becomes or this person becomes running away from home, hurting animals, setting fire. Hurting animals and setting fire at an early age is a strong predictor of antisocial personality disorder. So 50% of oppositional defined kids progress to conduct disorder as a teenager, and 1/3 of teenager progress to antisocial personality disorder when they have no remorse, no regret, no empathy, and they are the one ended up committing very violent crimes. So early intervention makes the difference. So I agree with you.
In Islam, There are three stages of prevention. One, they call it الوقاية الأولية. يعني the preliminary prevention of bad behavior or instilling good behavior. Rasul Sallallahu told us, teach your kids salah when they are 7. Well, they are not ordered to do salah until they reach puberty, right? But he said, teach them when they are 7 and have some kind of system of reward and so on when they are 10. Still, the salah is not on them, but we do that from the beginning. The second, and also we told the youth, whoever can afford to get married, then they get married at once and all that. So this is the very beginning, preliminary prevention of wrong and bringing right. Islam does not only tell you prevent the wrong, but it replaces, it gives you the alternative of good. Because with the absence of the alternative of good, it becomes very challenging to abandon wrong. You cannot tell a person to stop the wrong unless you have an alternative. Where am I going to go? So Islam tells us to do both at the same time. So prevent adultery, allow marriage. Prevent theft, have good economy. Prevent the people from becoming disbelievers, teaching them salah when they are young, and so on. Number two, you have to have a strong system of defense on the social level. Save yourself and your family from the fire of hell and all of that. So you have to have a good Islamic center, you have to have a good household, you have to have a good system, schooling, and so on. Like number three, it is the higher level of telling people exactly how to organize their life. Like how to organize your life. Salah will do this to you, Sabr will do this to you, good manners will do this to you, you need friendship, you need to pick the people you are with, you need to respect your parents, and those are the rules. So there are three levels of avoiding all this negative behavior and replacing them with good behavior on an early stage.
So can I, Jazakumullah khair for the beautiful discussions, Sister Azima, for spearheading and leading this conversation. So I want to also add on to some questions for the panelists and for the imams, especially the shuyukh. One of the biggest issue I think that we face is how do we identify red flags within the community? Not the victim, not the abuser, right? Because the victim and abuser, whatever it is going on within the home, and we don't know. As a community, we come to the masjid, we have friends, we have brothers, we have sisters, right? Are there some ways for us to determine that maybe the sister or maybe this family is going through, and to what extent can we go out and do something about it?
Amazing. I wish I can do that.
I think one of the issue in our community, especially I deal with a lot of Desi community in the hospital setting, there is a lot of stigma attached with the mental health issues. What we know, as I mentioned before, mental illness does not lead to increase in violence, but mental illness which is undiagnosed and untreated put you at high risk of violence and violent crimes. And people who are mentally ill and if they are unmedicated, not receiving any treatment, they self-medicate with drugs. So all studies shows that when someone is mentally ill and doing drugs or alcohol, they are at high risk of committing crimes. So number one thing, we need to keep an eye if this individual coming in masjid and you see something different, you see this person is looking odd, or if most of the individuals who are depressed, they talk about suicide. They talk about dying or being dead. They talk about being hopeless or helpless. If you notice some individual, talking about dying or being dead, you need to take it seriously. All suicidal, homicidal threats, you need to take very seriously. The part of the issue is that in our community, there is a lot of stigma attached to the mental illness. So even what I see I'm a child psychiatrist also, so what I see when a patient ended up a Desi patient ended up in the hospital, there is a lot of resistance to receive treatment. Even when this individual sent by the school, because this child is making threats in the school, and the school says, this child needs to be evaluated and possibly needs some medication. Parents, first thing I see in the morning that the parents are sitting in the lobby, they are demanding immediate discharge of this individual. They don't want any psychiatric treatment. They don't want any medications. All they want is, I write down this child is stable enough to go back to school. This is all they want. When on the other hand, when I tell them, this child is having this and this, they are in denial. They don't want to receive any treatment. So number one, most important thing in our community is having a mental illness is not a stigma. Every fifth American has a diagnosable mental illness at some point in their life, according to American Psychiatric Association. So it's not uncommon. Your child is not uncommon. I have recently, I have one individual, a teenager who was very depressed, have a lot of anxiety, and we recommended treatment. Parents fight with us every single day, and they pull him out. And within a week, he committed suicide. His body was found in a ditch. So that's what I think the most important thing in our community, breaking the barrier. Accept that, your person, your individual, your loved one has a mental illness and there is treatment available. Because what they do, especially in teenage, when they have a mental illness, nobody want to feel sad or anxious all the time, so they self-medicate with drugs. The common drug they do is cannabis or weed. And unfortunately, the weed nowadays is laced with some other substances such as PCP or acid, and that cause psychotic illness. So the child becomes very psychotic, delusional, hallucinating, and they ended up doing something very bad. So just keep an eye, talk to your neighbors, keep an eye on your community. If you see something different, in their behavior, then it's important to talk to the individual to seek professional help. There are many resources available. The best resource which you can use, if I know many of our Desi communities, they don't have health insurance. So NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, is a free organization. They have a lot of resources. They have support group. This organization is made by a loved one of individual who have mental illness. So you will not feel alone. You will get a lot of good advices. They can refer you to professional help. Harris Center also offer free mental health care, including medications and doctor's visit as well. So there are many resources available in nutshell.
So we have a lot of questions online as well as we have some questions set. So I want to request the speaker to bring minimum comments to 2 minutes, inshallah. And also, all of the questions that are asked, not everybody has to answer. If you feel that the other person did a good enough job, you can just pass and then you can have the other person answer. You can take up the next question. Does that make sense?
So I was just going to add about, what are the signs to look for in terms of the women community. And, one thing that my friends, that they, it's called, because I always tell them, people reveal themselves always if we're paying attention. And if someone patterns repeat, who someone is at home can guess it might take a little bit more into the relationship that I mentioned. You will see glimpses of it. So, for example, if they come to convention and they're being critical at questions about things happening here, chances are they're also being overly critical as well. Now, is that, an early red flag? No, it's a sign. It's one of the signs. Another one is if they actually overshare too many personal details. That's a little concerning. Another one is actually if they come to the convention a lot and they're actually very quiet. They actually scare the people that talk a lot, they scare the ones that don't say anything. But if they become a convention for a while and nobody really knows anything about them, that's actually concerning. Because usually there's lots of press and held in. Another one is if they're actually disrespectful or very argumentative. Once again, and this requires, obviously, if there's someone very confident, you're not going to be able to see this, but if someone's coming back and forth in the relationship, you're going to see these signs. Now, because you're not consistently, you just overlook it, because overlook at the other person. But you don't realize you just made a comment that actually could be insightful. So if we are actually paying attention, we will notice, but often we're just too self-absorbed to pay attention.
You want
to go with the question?
Yes. So to follow up on the question, we have determined some people who have certain red flags that may force us to believe that maybe they are like this at home as well. And maybe there are some issues going on at home as well. How do you approach something like this? How do you intervene? To what extent can we intervene, right? Sorry if these are some very direct questions.
So I think we're talking about family. Family notice that there is some issues.
Sorry.
Yes, so you can always talk to, of course, your family member and encourage them to seek professional help. If you feel like, this individual, your loved one, is talking about suicide or having, for example, a psychotic break, for example, talking to himself, you notice some changes in his behavior, he or she are not eating well, not sleeping, not taking shower, staying in his room all day long. You smell some drugs, for example. So you can talk to the individual, try to take him to the hospital if possible. However, in many cases, these individuals refuse to go to the hospital. So what I suggest you is you can always involve law enforcement. When you call police, you can ask for a crisis intervention team. So police department, Houston Police Department has a crisis intervention team, meaning that these police officers have a training dealing with mentally ill person. So the crisis intervention team show up at your home. You can explain to the officer that this person is having a psychotic break or he's talking about suicide. The magic word you can say is he's an imminent danger to self and other, you believe. So they can take this person to the hospital. My advice, practical advice to you is, find out a psychiatric hospital near to your home. Call the hospital and make sure they have a bed available, and almost all of the time they have a bed. Tell the police officer, take this person to this hospital. Otherwise, they're going to take this individual, your loved one, to any emergency room. The problem with the emergency room is, you ended up wasting a lot of time, because once the doctor in the triage, they realize that this is a mentally ill person or having some psychiatric issue, there is no medical emergency, they will not going to do anything. They're going to take care of more sick patient in the ER, so you ended up wasting several hours in the ER. And after that, they're going to send this individual to any random hospital away from your home. So this is just a practical advice. So in nutshell, you can persuade, you can encourage to go to the hospital, but or to see a doctor at least in the outpatient setting. But most of the time, these individuals have zero to no insight, so they refuse. So you can involve law enforcement and tell them to call and ask for crisis intervention team.
Thank you so much, Dr. for the beautiful answer. A quick question from online we have. What is the success rate after counseling, therapy, medicine, and spiritual guidance? Do we know that people actually get better after attending or these sessions or going seeking professional help? Is there any data on that?
So the data is, it depends. You will find the research to validate whatever you're looking for. From my own practice, I can see with the couples that I work with, the ones that do work, and everyone always wants a percentage of what percentage succeed, which percentage don't. And actually, I remember from my training, and I've been training myself in the best, they actually they said, we're going to set your expectations from right now. You're not a miracle worker. You're not going to save 50% of the couples that work with you. Because even before they get to you, those relationships will already do. It's really about the mindset of the individuals. And one of the critical things that I do when I'm working with the couples is I ask, are you both committed to making this work? And if it's a 110% yes from both people, it works. If it's a 95% from one person or even a 90% and 100 from the other, it's very bumpy. It really generally takes commitment from both individuals. Now, sometimes one person will hold back because they want to see is the other person going to step up. And that's okay, but by and large, the success rate is directly related to the effort that you put into from both parties. This whole, he's wrong, she's wrong, when he changes, then things will be good, or when she becomes less crazy, then we'll get better. That doesn't work. It is 100% joint responsibility on each person. That's what I've seen work statistically. And just like diabetes treatment has relapse, so does marital therapy. It has a relapse, because when you're in therapy, things tend to get good. When you get out of it, things tend to relapse. So then people come back for maintenance. And I find that the relationships that come in for the once a month maintenance, every quarter, 6 months, those also last.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. So the next question I have is for the Imam, Sheikh, as well as for the professional health counselors. What do you do about a person who has issues, say your wife, your spouse, but they're stubborn, they have anger issues, temper issues, and they don't listen or cooperate, they don't want to seek help. You tell them to go for counseling, let's go to the masjid, let's go to the therapist, let's go to some counseling, and they don't want to go. What does religion say, and what does professional therapy say, that what are we supposed to do?
Okay.
I love this one. Yeah, this is the $1 million question. I have actually a couple of cases just like that. And what you cannot achieve in its entirety, you cannot abandon it in its entirety either. So what you cannot achieve it in its entirety, you cannot abandon it in its entirety. So basically, when I have a spouse that was struggling with the other spouse, not accepting anything, and feeling that you're the one who has the problem, not me. While everything says that it's the other person, is very clear as the sun in the middle of the day. I'm not talking here about issues that maybe. No, I'm seeing with my own eyes, and I'm hearing with my own ears that what that spouse is doing to the other one. And the other one is getting in a state of depression and start being even suicidal because of that. So, and the other person says, I have no problem. They are the one who has the issues. So basically, I'm focusing on that person to give them support and to give them strength to go through this. While I'm debating with myself what some strategy in Houston, what the community can do to have an intervention. There is an intervention, if I call the crisis, intervention people to come and take that person by force to there, they should. They actually should. And I will not hesitate to call like that, And more than one time, when actually I give that suggestion, the person went straight to therapy. Out of fear of the stigma, They were afraid. And both, by the way, it's not about husband or not wife. I have the case that it is the husband and the case that it is the wife that will have the issue, right? And when I said, by the way, I have to call someone, right? Or you're going to book with a psychiatrist or a therapist tomorrow, right? And they go, and then they have a problem, and they are getting prescribed the medication. Yeah, it's not the best, but it's not the best ideal situation. It flips like a switch, but it is happening. But I am having an issue as a sheikh or an imam when somebody comes to me and they are that stubborn. I do not know what to do. We become very helpless as an organization. We are in the United States here. We are not like in Egypt, or there's power and there's force, and people are going to come and put the thing, Amisal Maganin Dawud, and then they strap them and take them. They're not going to do that. But in here, it's an issue. So I think we have to have a list of resources, as the doctor mentioned, and we have to have also maybe the doctors and professionals. They come up with a plan. That's step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. So if somebody comes to you as an imam, this is the first thing you do. This is the phone you call, right? And this is number 4 and number 5. Like the steps of intervention. I'd love to work on something like that. But there is no magic solution. I'm sorry to say that, but sometimes I do not know how to deal with it. I think I'm telling you the truth here. I don't know how to deal with it. I'm not a psychiatrist.
So the same question to the psychiatrist, but we only have 3 minutes because we have to get for
Yeah, it's a challenging situation. We need to roll with resistance. If we are argumentative, force them to go into treatment. Even if they show up in the treatment, and Dr. Handan know they're showing up in the therapy just to show the partner that we are in. Right. I am in therapy, but then showing resistance and doing nothing. So it's a difficult situation. But you can encourage them, roll with resistance. But at any point when this person or individual is a threat or making threats, then you need to take the person to the hospital. That's the best thing you can do so we can stabilize the patient. Right. You have any? Yes.
So one of the biggest challenges for mental health is that unlike your medical health, your physical health, there isn't a lot of science that we often can see. Like if we could actually get all brain scans and see what's going on with our brain, we would actually take this step a little bit more seriously. Now, there's a new generation called biofeedback, where there's thinking now like neurofeedback, where you can start giving some of this information, and the industry is changing more towards that. And myself I'm becoming specialized in it because I'm also a very big fan of data, of literally what's going on inside of your body. If you can see it, that's probably one of the best ways to convince someone, because now it's not what I'm saying or what my spouse is saying, but hey, this is the data. So doing a quantitative EEG is a great place to start. I actually have sent a couple of people to an actual brain center who've done it, and the husband was extremely resistant, but when the neuroscientist actually pointed out to him that his brainwaves were actually showing some hyperarousal, some significant hyperarousal that leads to hypervigilance and it could contribute to his anger and aggression. He's actually not going to do neurofeedback, which is another type of therapy. But my point is that sometimes using evidence-based therapy is starting to help, especially with the male population. And that's an angle that, inshallah, in the future we're going to start seeing more and more of. But we also need to, one thing that I do have a lot of male clients, and the reason why is that I have a very scientific background where if you can explain to them scientifically, I'm not saying everybody, because you still have stubborn people, but the ones that are a bit more resistant or maybe in 50% mark, if you can explain to them scientifically what is happening in their body and normalize it so it's not like a shaming of like you're bad, but this is actually beyond your control. When you understand your nervous system dysregulation or the automatic system and how this is pre-wired and it's unconscious. One of the biggest questions that I've always asked is, does it take pain to come into consciousness? And one of the famous psychologists, Carl Jung, said, there's no coming to consciousness. You cannot make the unconscious conscious without pain. And I've tried to refute that, but I'm not having the luck with it. And then even I think I was listening to a lecture one time by Sheikh Hamad Yusuf was about trials and tribulations, and he talks about everything in Islam. Growth generally happens in those trials and tribulations. So, I mean, if there's a magic formula to not have something tragic happen for you to wake up, I would love to know what that is.
I'll share with you.
Imam, can I just say one thing from
Yes,
what I'm trying to understand as a common person here, from all these panelists, wonderful panelists, is that I think for individuals here, what can I do? I think it's to have better conversations in your parties that you go to, in places at work, not the younger generation, because I know my kids talk about mental health all the time. To make the fact that, yeah, my kids go to therapy, not a big deal. To make that conversation, that word, therapy, not a loaded word anymore, and to have, so if somebody says my child goes to therapy, 10 people are not talking about their child, person's child. Oh my God, what did it do? Why did the child do that? When we stop doing that, right? Is that step one? I think all of us in this room can at least start doing.
Sure, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's what I got out of
Okay,
this.
Jazakallah khair. So inshallah we're going to take break for Salat al-Isha. We will continue after Salat al-Isha. Salat al-Isha is at 9:45. It is 9:40 now. So inshallah we'll have a 20 to 25 minute session right after Salat al-Isha, inshallah, if you wish to stay. And we want to have, at least towards the end, we want to come up with some kind of a solution-based answer so that we can compile some things and some data together, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Brothers, please move forward. And sisters, you can pray in the back here, inshallah. Jazakumullah.
السلام عليكم. كيف حالك؟
الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Inshallah, we're going to resume. I want to request the brothers and sisters who are done with their sunnahs, inshallah, to come and have a seat and settle down, inshallah. If you're feeling hungry, just so you know, we did dinner before Maghrib.
Oh.
And it was at 7:30 today.
Did I miss it?
You missed it.
I missed it. I missed dinner.
We posted on the flyer that dinner was at 7:30, box dinner before Maghrib. So, inshallah, we're going to start. And we do have some questions online, and also we have some really good questions.
I have the audience
as
from
well.
the audience.
So let's take some questions from the audience. The sister and the brothers have some questions. So may I kindly request that all of the sisters be seated on the left side.
Solutions. And the question for Dr. Hamdan, if I may. Talked a lot about the denial and the taking ownership and doing work on issues, which is pretty much everything that happens, that shouldn't happen but happens. So I would like to ask solutions for those things, but keeping in mind that when a spouse wants to correct the other, could you elaborate on methods or etiquette of critique? Because sometimes out of anger, we say things that we don't really want to or need to. So from a psychological point of view, that's one question. And also, if you could address validating someone's feelings, what that means and how to do that, and psychological.
Criticize someone, to tell them what you don't like about them, to tell them something they've done wrong. But what they have found is actually behind every criticism is a need. And most of us, and I'll give an example of a criticism, it's like, you never do anything right, everything is wrong, or you're always working too much, you're never around. It's a criticism, it's intent, but behind every criticism is actually a hidden need. We never feel comfortable talking about that hidden need because that means I have to be vulnerable and say what I need. So when I'm saying you never do anything right or you're always working too much, the hidden need there is, I need some attention and love and care, or I need some time for me. Now, but if I say that, I'm putting myself up for rejection, and nobody wants to be rejected, especially if you, as a child, you were rejected. So it's a lot easier just to attack the other person, and guess what? You're not going to get your need met either. So it's, unfortunately, there's a reprogramming. Criticism is actually something we've been doing for quite some time. So it's pausing and actually thinking about, okay, I'm attacking myself, but what is really behind that? That actually takes self-reflection, it takes a little emotional maturity. But it's possible that when you start doing this, like with everyday practice, where even if you criticize, and then usually a conversation, how it starts is how it ends. If it starts in attacking, it ends in attacking. Very rarely does it go well. So that's in terms of how to correct, is that try to use I language, try to ask for what you need. The second one was about validating, also very hard, but my husband's here, so everything that I'm saying is actually going to be used against me. And I'll be held accountable. The art of validating is the hardest thing because people think that if I validate your emotions, it invalidates mine. Meaning, if I say, I understand that you're upset and I can see why you're upset, that's very challenging because it means people think if you agree with it, and two, that means that you can't feel upset either. And that's not the case. When you're validating, you're just saying, I see things from your point of view, and the most challenging thing in a relationship is there's multiple realities. There's your truth and his truth, and there's actually a third truth. But we only believe in our truth. So validating is about, I understand you're upset, let me put myself in your shoes and see things from your side, and hopes that the person is also going to do the same, because we usually come with our position. That's why it's harder to validate the other person. And then the psychological difference, I mean, those are infinite. I think for the sake of time, that will probably be deferred another time. So I hope that answers your question.
There's one more question. Is still wanting to ask? Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to ask about, earlier we were talking about prevention and how one of the risk factors for becoming an abuser is having a traumatic childhood. So I feel like, because of my relatively short lifespan, a lot of the lectures I've attended or listened to surround the topic of respecting our parents, and obviously that's extremely valid, and we should always respect our parents. But I just want to know, like, at what point do we draw the line, or when do we, or how do we approach, situations where parents are not giving children their rights, and also, like, what are the rights of children over their parents Islamically, because I've never heard of them. And also just addressing the fact that I feel like a lot of times in our lectures and discussions, we assume like that everyone has like a healthy household, and so whenever someone is approached talking about just like familial problems with their parents, they're told, oh, just be patient or just respect the parents, but it's not always the case that a parent is giving the child that same respect back, or is a good parent in general. So.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jazakumullah. Go ahead.
No, that's a brilliant question. And that goes back to, and I will ask Sheikh and even Imam Tawqi to chime in on this, because you're right, I used to be a child once too, right, around your age, and all the khutbahs and everything always talked about from the adult's perspective, because guess who Hafiz are? Adults, right? Their perspective is from my point of view. Rarely we hear khutbah from a sister's point of view or from a kid's point of view. Today at Katie, I have to bring up, a brother pointed out from a sister's point of view. So it's a brilliant khutbah. And that's where I would defer to the two imams here.
Absolutely. So I'm going to just add to this question and direct it to Sheikh Mahmoud. So the question that we also have is, how do we deal with men who have back home mentality, especially when it comes to children who are raised over here and parents from back home? So the clash of the two cultures.
What is back home? This is not home?
Egypt and Pakistan.
Now, so back home, it comes from a premise that we are not home, So there is home, and I'm out of home, and over there is back home, right? So that means we are transient here, we're not stable. Means everything will become unstable, like nothing would make sense, because back home is waiting for us, So unless you consider this is home, lots of turbulence will be in your life. And I'm telling you that this is someone here who lived more than half in here in the United States. So I came to the United States when I was 23 years old. You can guess my age now. So I lived more than half of that over here in the United States. So I know exactly what people are talking about. My own parents used to say back home in what, 10 years? 10 years from when we came here. Until we went heads on and I said, you have to stop this. You're going to stop that. You're going to buy new furniture. You're going to buy a house. And this is home. And we're going to be buried in Almeida, Genoa if we live here. So that's it. Egypt is our place of birth, but we live here now, right? So believe me, believe it or not, lots of things were straightened. And I'm telling you from a personal experience. You know, my home is where my family is, where my kids is, where I have a job, where I live, where I sleep, where I go about my work. This is my home. And nobody can say back home, back home. Home is where you live, you know? Even if it is temporary. You live there, you have a life, that's your home. So this back home mentality is actually very harmful. Okay, now I come to that beautiful question here. Many people, it's a cultural thing, they mix between بر الوالدين طاعة الوالدين والإحسان للوالدين. There are three things, right? So بالوالدين إحسانا. Allah عز وجل says وبالوالدين is إحسانا. Have إحسان. إحسان means beyond any rules. Means there is no rule. إحسان means you're going to do your level best, regardless what is needed. What is needed, you have to deal with your parents now. So that is the premise. Whenever I deal with my parents, I'm going to deal with them not 1 + 1 = 2. No, I'm going to give them my best. Like the best I can do, I'm going to give them until there is no limit. And I do my best, right? So that's ihsan in general. Now, when my parents address me and say something to do, there is a criteria for that. The criteria is it halal or haram? Is it good or bad? And then now I have to go to the definition of Islam and that one. So if they tell me something which is not right, Allah says, فَلَا تُطَعْهُمْ. And that's ihsan actually. So ihsan to your parents is not to obey them sometimes. You see? So being ihsan to your parents. Birr al-walidayn means this virtuous relationship with your parents. You do not assume that they are always the authority figure. No. Always see that even when they address you wrong, they address you out of care, out of love. They want the best out of you. Sometimes they express it wrong. Sometimes they do not have the tools to say it right. But you have no doubt, your parents do not hate you. Yeah, this is a mentally ill person who hates his children, you know. So, but they like you, they love you. And I'm telling you again from a personal position in the middle. I have parents and I have children. And children who are about to get married. Yeah. So it's not like little tiny children, I have those two, but you know, I have children and I have parents. So this balanced relationship, yes, I differ with my father, but if it is within the permissible, his opinion goes. You see what I'm saying here? So if it is something like, I am right and he is right, I will make him feel happy in doing his thing. And that's my ihsan, you know, my birrul walidain. But if sometimes he tells me, no, you have to do it like that, and I tell him, no, Islamically, I have to do it like that. And I'm going to do it like that. I'm going to treat my kids like that. He might be unhappy sometimes, but and you answered the question also, the young sister answered the question. You have to know what are the Islamic rights. Do the kids have rights upon their parents? Absolutely. They have rights of education, they have rights of religion, they have social rights to take care of them until they can stand on their own feet. They have rights to spend on them. They have rights to, the kids have rights upon their parents to support them, to take care of their health, to take care of their education, and to provide them with shelter. That is your right upon your parents. But it is not your right upon your parents that you tell them what to do. Because these kids always say, you know, why when I'm telling you, you are not listening to me? Why I have to listen to you and you are not listening to me? You see? And I am telling you again, because I am in the middle. I have parents who talk to me like that, and I have children who I talk to them like that. So believe me, what I'm telling you is very balanced, you know? So never ever go in the trap of putting your parents as an equal to you. You lose right away, because they're going to play the parents' card. I am your father, and that's it. End of discussion. And he's right. I am your mother. What are you going to do about that? You know, I'm your mother. I carried you at 9 months. I breastfed you. I took care of you. I changed your diapers. And all of that. What are you going to do? And then Islam will tell you that whatever you do, you cannot pay your mother back. So who's the loser here? I said, so your mother has to be your mother up there at all times. Regardless what she says is right or wrong, up there. And this is nothing wrong for you. You look up to your mom. So when you are looking up like that, you will have a better perspective how to fix their mistakes. Their mistakes to be fixed from someone down here to someone up there. Not like your friend. Your friend, you can talk to them bluntly and like that. And when you are a parent, also have some rahmah on your children, you know. They are down there, so have mercy on them as well. You know, you're not always you deal with them like some adult, someone in your stage as well. That way, subhanAllah, then we live in the freedom. Parents have mercy on their children, and the children have very respect, too much respect to their parents, problems will be solved. Problems will be solved. I was in the stage always doing like this with my father, Sheikh Mustafa, right? All the time. I'm the young Sheikh, and I have been done like this, I have been done like this. I said, okay, I'm learning from you now, he says. You know, everything is reversed now. You know, father learned from this one, Allah, Bismillah, teach me. I lost, right? Then when you start dealing with that level of respect, he's always going to be up there as a father. Maybe his idea is not right, but as a father, he is always up there. I cannot change that. You see, once I do that, now he will never do anything except consulting with me first. I hope I answered that question, right? So you have to learn what are the rights of the parents. You have to keep that level. They will never come down equal to you. You will never go above them. It's not going to happen. You are not going to get older than your father or your mother. You are not going to get wiser than them. It's not going to happen. You may think, but inshallah, keep it like that, and inshallah, you will find harmony in the house, inshallah.
Yes, so we're just going to take the last question, and then inshallah, we're going to move towards the conclusion.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Mamdou, you have mentioned about the education. And part of the education is providing information to the community. And my question to you is that, is there a list of Muslim psychiatrists and Muslim psychologists? Because sometimes these kind of problems are better understood by Muslim professionals. So if you have that, that would be great. And if you don't have it, I'll be more than happy to volunteer to conduct or compile this list also for the community as well.
I think I should have a resource, right?
Yeah, we do have a list. Yes, we do have a list. Currently, we have a list. This list is called ISDH Community Resource Guide. It has contacts of all of the professional therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, as well as city and state resources that are out there as well. But at this point, we are recreating a new list with updated information. We're hoping to get this out by today and to bring it to you physically, but we weren't able to do that because of so much going on. So inshallah, on the next program, I assure you, inshallah, we will have some type of a handout in every program for the community to take with them as exactly what you said, a resource guide of mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, so that you can take with you. And also we'll put up a link on our website, ISDH website as well. You can always go to the website, you'll find all of the resources there, inshallah.
Inshallah, it will keep growing, inshallah.
And thank you for your help. You can reach me, inshallah. You can help me with that as well. Yes, we were good.
There was
Yeah. So let's try to make it brief because we want to finish, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Good discussion. The only thing that's missing is that we did not talk about, the divorce issue here, because as a tragedy that unfolded here in the community, 95% of those tragedies are consequence of divorce. And why is that? It's because We don't have resources within the Muslim community. And what happens is the couples now they go into the system, the American system, which is skewed, towards, one party than the others. And that will lead to basically bad consequences, like, for example, the parents will not be able to see their child and all that. So what can we do as a community to basically try to prevent that, or try to bring people in the masjid for counseling, because like what they do in the courts, they have like mediators. And we can do that here, or we can go even further to have maybe like they have in the UK, an Islamic court, where they go and they have marriage in the Islamic court, and if that something happens, then they can resolve it in the Islamic court. So if we can do that, basically, what are you proposing that within the community to touch on that particular point?
Jazakumullah khair, brother, for your very important question. I think it is much needed in the community. And you're absolutely right. We are not, we don't have something as much as we should, especially we had one of the question of the destigmatization of divorce, that people look down upon it so much that they don't even consider it an option, whereas sometimes divorce is a good option for people, especially if they are in a very difficult, traumatic type of relationship, especially toxic relationship where it's just waning or taking the other person down. So it is something that needs to be talked upon. And also the other issue that we have is the younger folks are quickly, just because they don't get along and they have small issues of communication, they jump to divorce. And it's something that needs to be worked on and needs more education towards that. To answer your question in terms of the divorce, we do have a committee at ISGH. It's called Family Dispute Resolution Committee, and Sheikh Mamdouh is the chair of that committee. If you don't know that Sheikh Mamdouh is also not just an imam, but he's also certified by the state of Texas as a licensed mediator between couples who are going through a divorce. So if anyone who's going through a divorce and they don't want to spend so much money with a lawyer, and especially if there's a lot of finances involved and you have children involved. So if you go to a mediator, a licensed mediator who is licensed in the state of Texas, he can mediate the finances between you. It will cost you much less. And whatever you decide and that licensed mediator signs on it, it will be acceptable, and even the judge cannot contest that. Is that accurate? Yes. So Sheikh Mamdouh, not just an imam, mashallah, he is also a professional licensed mediator to mediate between couples. So alhamdulillah, that's why all of the cases in terms of khula, in terms of fasl nikah or things like that, we refer all of them to Sheikh Mamdouh. And a lot of times people do say that they can't get a hold of him is because he has a lot on his plate. He has a lot going on. So inshallah, we need to expand on it. And we are already low on imam. When it comes to Houston, we don't have that many imams, but we need more people to step up on this and take this mediation position, because it's a very good service to the community.
Yeah, and the mediation process is very exhausting. There are about 12 steps that you have to go through with them to reach, and it takes 4 to 8 hours continuously without a break. 4 to 8 hours until you reach. But the good thing about, as Sheikh Tawqir said, it's finished in one day, and whatever they agree on. And alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, I have a formula to finish the Islamic and the civil together. So they don't have to go, okay, I'm divorced like in the court, and most of them, they go in good terms. Like, they sit face to face and we finish the things. Also the arbitration. Arbitration is like, I become the judge, I say, but there's no discussion. Like everybody presents, their lawyer presents in front of me, and then I award the decree at the end, like exactly like the judge. And when it goes to the court, it's finalized. The judge just asked them, is this your signature? Yes, so it's done. He's not gonna even go through the details. So we do that, inshallah. And the Islamic court is something that's coming up, inshallah. There is one in Dallas called the Islamic Tribunal, and they are doing that already. And inshallah, we're going to do one under IGH in Houston, inshallah. So this is something coming up, inshallah. And then we'll expand the family services in IGH. This is something that is already in the works. And for you, brother, you said, doctor, I'm not there yet. Maybe in a couple of months, inshallah. Make dua for me, you know. And my PhD thesis is about divorce. It's not a good thing, but it's about divorce. And you know, for me, what the work would do, that's half of Houston would like me, half of Houston would hate me. You know that, right? So almost any divorce judge or person, it's half and half, 50-50. People don't want to hear my name, and other people like my name. So it depends what was the ruling. Yeah. That's why I prefer mediation. So both are okay with it. So at the end, inshallah, all these things I discussed, alhamdulillah, this is so far 750 pages of research, and it is a comparison step by step with the family, the Texas Family Code in regards to divorce, comparison between Texas Family Code and the Sharia, both the custody, the alimony, the divorce, the process, the procedure, all of that. What is the khul', the annulment, the voiding of marriage, all of that is side by side. And then at the end, the last chapter is a formula to have a good Islamic marriage contract and a good Islamic divorce contract. So hopefully it works, inshallah. And in between, I'm with you.
Jazakallah khair. So inshallah we will conclude. At last, I want to.
You need a
sorry.
mic? Really likes that.
Jazakumullah khair. We're going to conclude with this program, inshallah. At last, I want to ask this conclusion question, solution-based question to all of the panelists. If you can please answer this question in 2 minutes. What is the takeaway from today's program? Or what is the takeaway from overall in general, or how to avoid more incidents like this to happen in the community? If all of you can, inshallah, just 2 minutes, give your solution and what should we take from here. And inshallah, I'll compile that in a list of all of the programs, and then we will present it to the executive body and the leadership of IHGH and let them take it from there, inshallah. So we can start from whoever. You can start from
Let's start.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. There you go.
Key takeaway. I always end with this because it's the hardest, is we are phenomenal at pointing everyone else's flaws. We are horrible at pointing out our own flaws. So every time you notice something that you dislike in someone else, I want you to ask yourself, what do I have inside myself that represents that? If we can flip the lens from outside to inside and take personal responsibility, because the only person you can change is yourself. But yet we want to change everybody else. And that's not going to get us anywhere. It's literally avoidance. Someone asked me earlier about, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I'm going to also end with this. Alhamdulillah, if somebody's going to the mosque, that's a great thing, but it's not enough to evaluate their character. And one of the things that I see in the community, I never thought in my life that I would be working with, whether it's imams or, alhamdulillah, I am. But one thing I realized is that a lot of people that are considered mosque goers have a lot of character behavioral issues that psychologically need help. So we have this thing as a community where we turn the other cheek when someone goes to the mosque because mashallah he's going to profession, he's going for Isha. But then, a couple of sisters came and talked to me and said, can I mention this? Is that yes, we see that. There's a lot of behavioral issues that get overlooked that are concerning and that need to be addressed from a psychological. Just like you go to a doctor when you have a broken arm, going to the mosque is not going to solve that broken arm. So if someone has character flaws, they need to see a professional to address that. Okay, so I guess the two takeaways are look inside, and it's both spirituality, Islam is critical, and psychology. It's not either or.
My message would be, if you have any mental health issues, come forward and get help. There is no stigma. As I said before, mental illness is not uncommon. And if your loved one is suffering, make sure you seek help. A couple of things regarding domestic violence, which we forgot to mention, I guess. If you think you have a loved one who is going through some difficult marriage and have some anger problem, make sure if you have firearm in the house, it should be secure. It is very important. And also, just keep in mind, when the victim moved out of the house, when there is a separation, there is increased risk of violence and death. In fact, 75% of homicide or murder happen in domestic violence cases after victim move out of the house. Because in case of domestic violence, abuser is looking for power, control, dominance. And once victim move out, there is a high risk of violence. So make sure you have a good safety plan in place. Thanks.
Inshallah, my takeaway are a few, so I'm going to make them pretty short, inshallah, and precise. One, that it is very, very important to focus on the individual, on yourself, and the hadith to depict what Dr. Hamdan said. ما لك ترى القذاة في عين أخيك ولا ترى الجذع في عينك. Why you only see the little tiny dirt in your brother's eyes, but you do not see the trunk of the tree that's blocking your vision, your own vision. So you have a bigger problem than others normally. When you actually seeing a tiny problem with someone is a problem in itself. Yani when you are so focused to pick a small problem in someone, that shows a bigger problem that you have. Because you are not noticing yours, you are noticing the small one, means your focus is on someone. That's a problem in itself. So that's what Islam says. So my takeaway is, I see now how important it is to focus on the individual by providing a small literature, small short literature, saying who's a good Muslim. Who's a good Muslim? A good Muslim in Aqidah is this. A good Muslim in Ibadah is this. A good Muslim in dealing with others is this. A good character of the person who goes to the masjid is that. So that is the takeaway. The other one is the emphasis on relationships. We do not have definition for relationships. Everybody goes with their own thing. Oh, I want to get married. I ask people, why do you want to get married? They don't have an answer. Whenever a husband and wife comes and I say, who's this guy to you? She doesn't have an answer. Who's this woman to you? Who's my wife? What does that mean? I'm serious. Like I asked her, who's this? Oh, he's my husband. How many years? 40 years. What does that mean? So who's he? ATM machine? Is he a service provider? Is he like a guy? Like, you wake up in the morning and say, oh my God, like this? Well, who's that? And who's she? They don't have an answer. So basically, definition of basic relationships is needed for us. Wallahi, sometimes we take things for granted, but you do not know. Who is that person? My wife, who wakes up in the morning, who bears my children, who does all of this. What is that to me? If you define that, then you will see how to talk to her, how to deal with her. When you know who's the husband, you know how to talk to him, how to speak. We don't demand this. We're begging for these things because we do not know why we should give them. So takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3, we need professionals. We need professionals. If you are afraid that when you talk to someone about your problems, it's going to become the talk of the town, it is a valid concern. It is a valid concern. I'm telling you, like if I come and talk to you, one of the possibilities that you're going to go tell somebody, it's a possibility. It's a logical possibility, isn't it? Yani when you come talk to Sheikh Mamdouh, isn't it a possibility that Sheikh Mamdouh is going to go tell people? Yes or no? It's a possibility. But do I do it or not? That is where you need to make sure, right? Am I going to do that? Am I that kind of person or not? I need to assure you with that. You see? So there has to be a contract. There has to be some, what they call it, the HIPAA, HIPAA. There have to be some confidentiality rights. Everything has to be clear, and then everybody has to know the right. If it is violated, nobody knew my problem except you. So why people are talking in the masjid about that means you're going to be held responsible. I'm just trying to say this takeaway for things. Everything is a solution. You are in a country, there's data, writing, contracts, right? And know your laws, and that's it. So if you do not know any of that, you blame only yourself. So those are my takeaway. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a good beginning. May Allah reward Sister Saadiya, her daughter, and her mother for being the reason that this initiative started. May Allah Azza wa Jalla make it in the balance of their deed in the Yawm al-Qiyamah, you know. Sometimes we have good that comes out of this horrible thing. This horrible thing is horrible, but alhamdulillah, look at us now. I did not expect this turnout to become like this. So alhamdulillah, thank you, and please stand up together. And inshallah, IGH is for you, to serve you. Inshallah, it's a huge organization, it's a beautiful organization, only with you being involved. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah Kaseera for giving me the opportunity to be part of the panel. The one thing I took away, and it's just a quick thing, is that no solution will come forward if brothers are not at the table. The conversation about violence, about mental illness, about all of that, we can have as many halaqas and as many things as possible, and our sisters and youth might be more educated, but if brothers aren't helping initiate and coming to table, and I'm also very glad to see a lot of the brothers here. Question is now we need to reach out to the ones who didn't come, sisters and brothers included. So if we can be the ambassador for change, inshallah, we will move forward.
No, Jazakumullah khair. I would like to conclude. Anybody else has any points? Inshallah, I think that whatever was said, it was good enough. Alhamdulillah. I want to remind you that inshallah our next program is next Saturday at Masjid Hamza, inshallah. Next program, session number 2, as organized by the Islamic Society of Greater Houston, is going to be at Mission Bend, Masjid Hamza, next Saturday, not Friday, Saturday, inshallah. And we will have a similar type of style, inshallah, discussion with the community. If you are able to, do come out, inshallah, and do participate in these discussions, in these gatherings. Subhanallah bihamdik, subhanakallah bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for coming. Very good.
Brothers, we need your help to carry the book, The Body Keeps Score? The Body Keeps Score. Way out, please. I would hold the chairs in the back. You're an academic, so you might And if you want, please make sure that you leave the facility before 11 o'clock, before the security alarm goes off. For everyone else, we have many minutes to leave the facility before the alarm goes off.
The thing is, that's a great thing to do.
I will try to approach her. The only issue with the idea is that they don't want to don't tell her. Oh, okay.
Very happy with the
I'll take it.
on a regular basis. Yeah. Wait.